Waking up to the news of yet another package exploding, this time in the city of Schertz, not in Austin, but there is a strong possibility, according to NBC News and its sources, that it could be connected to the Austin bomber. Here's what we know about the explosion that happened inside the FedEx facility. It happened shortly before 1 a.m. this morning. There were 75 FedEx workers inside this building at the time on Door Lane, and that is when the package exploded. It was a box that exploded. It was on the conveyor belt, according to the police department over in Schertz. There were no serious injuries. There was one worker, a female, who was injured just because of the loud sound of the explosion, but not because of any kind of shrapnel that was flying through the air. But of course, investigators are on scene this morning, the ATF, the FBI, along with other police departments in the area, to figure out the debris that was scattered around this FedEx facility. Is it the same kind of materials that the Austin bomber was using to make those bombs, those explosions, or is it the work of a copycat? All questions we want to ask Fred Burton with Stratfor, the security global firm that is based here in Austin, live on the phone with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's talk about, Fred, the timing of these explosions. I want to let our viewers know, and just stick with me as we walk through this timeline. The first one, March 2nd, that was a wrong theory from Austin police. They thought that it was somehow related to a drug raid on Haverford Road. Then 10 days later, that explosion that kills the 17-year-old. And then while police are on that scene, reports of yet another explosion, this time injuring a 75-year-old woman. And then Sunday, Fred, when you have ATF, the FBI, and you have APD saying, we want to offer an award for whomever can catch this bomber, there is another explosion happening in southwest Austin. Are you seeing a pattern here that this person could be taunting police?
I believe so. I think the sequence and timing sure indicates that. The critical part with this new explosion at the FedEx facility, this would be number 5, is it forensically linked, meaning a reasonable person, and I know I would be looking at that from a working theory, but we have to make sure we're not dealing with a copycat. But I think a reasonable investigator would conclude that this is probably more than likely linked to the 4 previous bombings here in Austin. So, the MO shifts are a bit surprising to me. Typically, bombers will stick to one established pattern. The tempo and pace is also a bit frightening as far as I'm concerned, because it's almost like the bomber, if in fact number 5 is connected at the FedEx facility, he wants to get rid of these before he's either captured or killed. But we are dealing with a very good bomb maker who is absolutely terrorizing our city.
Wouldn't this be a game changer if we talk about the explosions, the first 3 with packages that were not sent through the mail but left in the dead of night on doorsteps? And then the latest one on Sunday in Austin happened to be with a tripwire, people walking on the sidewalk. And all this time, police saying, you know what, these are packages that haven't been sent through the mail. Those packages are safe to open. But Fred, if this is connected, the one in Schertz that was sent through the mail, what does this say?
Well, this say that the bomber is adjusting his tactics predicated upon the public statements. If you look at what's transpired that you laid out, he has put the fear in the city with packages left on doorsteps. Now he's moved to these tripwires in a neighborhood where kids are just walking down the street with their bikes. So now we've moved to FedEx. Now, on a positive note, if the FedEx one is linked, there should be a tremendous amount of investigative leads just because of the great job FedEx does in tracking packages. So typically bombers mess up on forensics, and so I think that at times you just need to get a lucky break. But let's not lose sight of the fact of one thing here. There is no greater bombing investigation underway in the continental United States than right here in Austin, Texas. We've not seen any kind of response from the federal authorities in a long time like this. We have 500 agents here from ATF and the FBI. So the whole system in our post-9/11 world is geared to find people just like this. So this is also a good test on our Homeland Security response as to how quickly we could find a person like this.
Fred, this is John Dabkovich. You had mentioned that if this bomb had been sent, well, was sent through FedEx, that opens up a different sort of information, because somebody would have to have presumably taken that to a FedEx or someplace where it could be dropped off. Does that in any way indicate that maybe this is not the same person, or that maybe this could be coming to an end and the person might understand that eventually the police are going to catch up?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I'm very confident that the police are going to catch the bomber. The question will be how quickly, and it literally becomes a race against time. Forensically, this could be nothing more than a tactic shift on the part of the bomber, who has thought through how he's going to send this package even by FedEx. Mm-hmm. For example, using an alias name, paying in cash. So those kinds of details are fascinating once they get released. Also, let's not lose sight of the fact of one thing. This package was bound to some location here in Austin. So where is that location? So once they can piece that together, the ATF and FBI will be knocking on that poor victim's door here, this morning. So the other concern will be, are there other bombs and other kinds of distributors, kind of channels, so obviously FedEx by now is checked, but you'll have, UPS and DHL and others being looked at. Not to mention the independent couriers that, travel around our city. Yeah,
we should mention that NBC's Pete Williams has reported that through his sources that they say there was a good indication this package was bound for Austin, but they have not confirmed that yet. One thing you had said, I believe yesterday, Fred, was that you described the bomber in Austin having been 4 for 4 in successfully building and placing the bombs without them going off, unexpectedly on the way to the site or whatever. The fact that this one exploded, I guess, in transit would be the way to put it, does that indicate to you that maybe it was somebody who is different, that is less skilled, or is just the act of bomb making that difficult that sometimes these quote-unquote accidents happen?
Well, it also could be something as simple as this was purposeful on his part, knowing that he was going to target the FedEx facility and that the bomb was going to detonate there to try to throw investigators off the trail. Look, I think we're dealing with a person that we haven't seen the likes of in quite some time. If you compare and contrast this to most jihadi kind of plots and bombers in the United States, they usually fail. So this is a person that knows exactly what they're doing, is very methodical, and has thought through all these different options. So, and the thing about it is he continues to be one step ahead, and I don't think we need to lose sight of that.
Fred, when you look at the facility here, and just to give you and our viewers an idea, you're looking at a live picture of the Schertz FedEx facility in Schertz. There are lots of packages in that building. What do you think investigators will be doing right now to make sure there are no more explosives in the mail?
Well, first thing they'll do is FedEx will do, and they do a great job with checking their own supply chain. Obviously, notifications will go through the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. They do a good job of looking for suspicious packages all the time. So, our system is geared to look for things like this, especially, the enhancements made after the anthrax scare, after 9/11. So the system is geared to look for packages like this, but I think it's incumbent upon all of us in the city to make sure that, your kids know about these kinds of issues, that they're counseled as long as they're age appropriate to be careful and to look out for things such as this, because I don't think we've seen the last of this person, provided this FedEx bomb is linked.
When you say that, do you think that this person, and you said this earlier in our interview, is trying to get rid of these explosives that he's made before he's caught? What do you mean by that?
I do. In essence, bombers very rarely make just one bomb. For example, when we captured Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind of the first World Trade Center bombing, he had several bombs that he had made. Bombers tend to do these in groupings. So it would not be surprising to me that he's put together perhaps as many as 8 to 12 of these. And the last thing he wants is to be captured without having these kinds of devices distributed. So in essence, what he's going to do now is try to think of different kinds of methodologies, different kinds of ways of getting bombs out, in my judgment. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see if, in fact, this FedEx bomb is linked, where it was destined to. Is there some geographic profiling you could do? You had north, you had east, you had southwest. So is he working his way around the map of Austin, just trying to paint the city? So where this device was destined for, to me, is a critical link in trying to understand motive.
Fred, I think one of the things that has come up a lot in this is people have said, well, this person must have some sort of military or law enforcement training or background. But given your experience with everything that's out there on the internet these days, is that a given anymore like it was 15, 20 years ago, that the person must have been trained to do this?
Well, the difference being is, yes, you can learn how to make one of these from studying it, but I can tell you this, that to get these to work consistently is difficult to do. It really takes a trained skill or the ability to practice, meaning this person would have to go out to a deer lease or to a ranch and get it right. Very rarely do bomb makers get it right with a degree of consistency. Even the Unabomber who tortured us for years in the D.C. area had failed devices that he mailed, and he was kind of the gold standard for bombers. So this person is getting it right. Even if this number 5, in fact, is linked at the FedEx facility, he still had a functional device. We don't know if it was on a timer. Maybe it was designed to detonate there. So that's the kind of, it's too early to say before the dust settles, so to speak. But, I think it's very reasonable to assume number 5 is linked. But you have to rule it in or rule it out really quickly.
Just a quick note for our viewers at home watching or online. We're going to continue our coverage over on the CW Austin and our conversation with Fred Burton as well. Fred, I have just a few more questions before we continue our coverage over on the CW Austin this morning. Talk a little bit about how the pressure is on the FBI and the ATF. This is a massive investigation to find who did this. And would you classify this as domestic terrorism?
Well, I certainly would move this into domestic terrorism, in my judgment. He clearly has, although we don't know motive, he's clearly terrorizing the city, and you have to have that on your whiteboard as possible motivations until proven otherwise. And I also base that just on the skill set of the actual bomber, too. So, I know it's too early to declare that for official Department of Justice purposes, but I pretty much would say that probably every FBI and ATF agent there is looking at this as domestic terrorism. And I know the reasons and the politics behind why you don't want to say that, but, a practical person would very quickly reach that conclusion.
There is no doubt that there is a city and, of course, neighborhoods who are on lockdown and in fear when this person is going to strike again. We want our viewers to know that our conversation continues with Fred Burton from Stratfor over on the CW Austin. Amanda and Natalie also standing by with a quick check of your weather and traffic right over there. And Fred, I'm going to ask you in just the next few minutes, if you could stay on the phone with us, I want to ask you about the timing of these explosions and what does it say about this person?
Now, breaking news from KXAN News.
Our conversation continues with Fred Burton with Stratfor. It is a global security firm that is based here in Austin. And just for our viewers, we both have interviewed Fred Burton before, and he has dealt with the worst of the worst situations when it comes to explosives and bombings. He is an expert when it comes to trying to figure out who could be behind such travesty, especially the one that has been plaguing and putting an entire city here in Austin on a lockdown and fear. The latest explosion happening in the city of Schertz. It was a package that exploded at a FedEx facility shortly before 1 a.m. It was a package that was sent through the mail, and NBC News is saying there's a strong possibility that that package was supposed to be sent here to Austin, so that would give us an indication that perhaps these are connected. Fred is once again on the phone with us, joining us live for another conversation about these explosions. Fred, good morning again.
Good morning.
Okay, you talked to us over on KXAN about the timing of these explosions and why you are especially concerned with that.
Well, I think the tempo to me is also fascinating. Usually bomb makers want to live to send another package for another day. They space these out. There's a very methodical kind of mindset as to when they're going to mail them and to who. Now we're seeing a tempo that I was just going off the top of my head on the break. I can't recall a tempo like this, and the fear factor that's being utilized from a psychological perspective reminds me a little bit about the D.C. sniper case where you had a person that was just randomly shooting people in D.C. Now in this kind of scenario, you've got a person that's randomly mailing bombs or dropping bombs off in some capacity, provided number 5 at the FedEx facility is linked. So I think this is a fascinating case study in a bomber, and I'm not so sure we have a similar case study to draw a nexus to, at least that I can remember off the top of my head.
Fred, so with this explosion that happened down at the FedEx sorting facility, obviously question number 1 is going to be, is this connected to the bombings that happened in Austin? Is it the same person? In your experience, is there something that they can find fairly early on just by looking at the scene or the debris left that will give them a positive indication that yes or no, this person is the same person that's been sending out the bombs in Austin?
Yes, and it's typically things such as shrapnel or nails, similarity of nails, identical nature of the specificity of wire or any of the recovered material, as well as your ability to sample and rapidly determine explosives. And so if the explosives match up to the previous ones, if you have a similar nail that has been used in other previous package bombs, like the first one was shrapnel and nails. This one at the FedEx facility was shrapnel and nails. So obviously a reasonable person is going to conclude it's from the same bomber, but you don't know until you line them up to make sure that they're the exact kind of components. Bomb makers are very methodical and are creatures of habit when it comes to these kinds of materials. It's just a method of delivery, and the target set perhaps might be different, but how that is, the sausage is made inside the box is usually very identical.
Mm-hmm. In your experience, is it likely or possible that with this situation that this one bomb had been sent through the mail or FedEx, that it is only one? Is it possible that there are more that have been sent that are out there right now in a truck somewhere?
Well, it's something that you could not rule out. Having said that, if you look and think that this is the same bomber, in all probability this was a specific act on the bomber's part to put it and deliver it via this method. So then you have to set back and go back to your drawing board and say, okay, now what's next? What could he do? And in all probability it's a male. What could he do next that we haven't anticipated? So, it becomes a cat and mouse game, and this is part of the bomber's psychology. I mean, this is what he's enjoying watching. He loves the fact that news is covering this and that he's one step ahead of the law. This is part of his plan.
And the plan right now, Fred, is that we have 500 ATF and FBI agents who were in Austin just investigating the latest bombing in Austin, which had to do with a tripwire. And now if this explosion over at FedEx that was sent through the mail then exploded inside the building. When you look at the patterns here, and if you can, is this bomber getting more brazen? Or what would you say about his pattern so far, from packages on doorsteps, tripwire, to now throwing investigators off path again and putting something in the mail?
Well, I would say he's ingenious. He's crafty. This is an individual with a high intellect, probably moderately high on the IQ scale. He has a complete understanding of the pace and tempo of Austin, going back to the first bombs being delivered on the edges of South by, away from downtown, where all the cops and all the video surveillance is posted. This is a person that is comfortable on the streets of Austin, and now he is either adjusting his delivery method based upon law enforcement and news media coverage of this, and he has a very orderly plan. So now you have to, from a behavioral profiling, look at what could we see next, what could be his next move. But in many ways, he's controlling the scenarios here, and law enforcement is reacting to these devices. So this is part of the challenge. Will law enforcement catch him before he kills again?
Fred, I have no doubt that we're going to hear from agents later on today, and this time their message will be maybe suspect and check your packages that are delivered through the mail. That is one that we haven't heard before. It's always been, if it was delivered through the mail, then it could be safe because these other ones were left on the doorstep overnight. Yesterday, when we were hearing from witnesses and neighbors in Southwest Austin, they were saying that federal agents were asking about Wi-Fi and if their Wi-Fi at home is secure. Any idea why that would be part of the investigation, and what does that say?
What they're looking for is anybody that might have pinged a Wi-Fi system. For example, you or I outside the house in a neighborhood trying to connect. Any kind of anomalies, unusual behavior. This gets back to, a little bit of gumshoe work, looking at some obvious kinds of potential lead development tactics, such as cell phone tower data, traffic cams coming in and out of the location. Anybody see unusual people pop up on their Wi-Fi in that window of time where this occurred? Granted, these are long shots, but you have to at least ask those questions, and sometimes you just got to get lucky. I mean, I remember investigating a bomber once that had launched rockets at our embassies in Madrid and Jakarta, Indonesia, and lo and behold, a New Jersey state trooper stopped the same bomb maker on the New Jersey Turnpike, and he had a bomb in the back seat of his car.
Wow.
So something like this could very well happen here, where an alert patrol officer just stops a suspicious person. So these things happen all the time, and it was the exact same way Timothy McVeigh was caught, who was the Oklahoma City bomber. So the more resources you have devoted to a problem, the likelihood is you're going to cover in quickly all the leads that you're going to exhaust all the usual leads, such as looking at Home Depot surveillance tape and receipts. By now, ATF has a good model and mock-up of the actual bomb, so they know exactly what to hunt for.
So, Fred, I'm just seeing now a quote from that we're getting from one of the FBI special agents down there who said, quote, "It would be silly for us not to admit that we suspect it's related to the 4 other bombings here in Austin." Now, you've mentioned that as well, too, that you would think any sensible, investigator would start from that position. If that is the case, that this is related and that this was sent through FedEx, which seems like it provides so much more information because you'd have to drop the package off somewhere, and if it was in one of these FedEx stores, there would have to be video of that person coming in that we could directly connect to that. Does that then in any way indicate to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that we may be nearing the end, that the person is realizing that there's only so much more they could do?
I don't think so. The mindset of these bombers is such that they're very methodical with their plan, and if the cops move in, trust me, I think he also has a plan. So he has thought about this. He doesn't think he's going to get away with this forever, but he is riding on a high right now where he's being very successful. So let's say, for the sake of argument, he has constructed more devices, which I think he probably has. I think that tempo that we're seeing now is going to continue at this fevered pace because I just don't believe he's going to want to get captured with all these devices because he's put so much time and effort into everything he's already done. So he's going to try to get rid of these in some manner, in my assessment.
Fred, one last question, and we'll let you go because I know that you are a very busy man. But from everything that you have seen in your investigations of covering many, many things, the worst of the worst, where does this fall on that list?
Well, he's certainly, and I don't want to say callous when I say this, I've worked major bombings and crime scenes where you have a lot of people killed and injured in plane crashes and plane bombings and so forth. The tragedy that he has caused is certainly horrific. But these bombs are, from a tactical perspective, pose all kinds of problems. So I think it's a great opportunity for law enforcement to learn, and I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned as to how this was handled going back to even the first bombing. So, this person is terrorizing our city. I think he's a domestic terrorist of some ilk. We don't know specific motive yet. And I think we need to catch him quickly before he kills again. Because, as you mentioned, this is more of a psychological game? In his mind, yes, meaning he's enjoying greatly the fact that he's outthinking the police department, the FBI, and ATF. Now, others have thought that, too, over time, and they usually fail to realize the resolve that federal law enforcement has to find this person. So I don't think this is going to end well for the bomber. Let me just leave it at that.
Fred Burton with Stratfor. I always appreciate your time. We really enjoy talking to you. It's fascinating.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.